A&E goes behind the scenes with Rowan Atkinson, star of the critically acclaimed series The Blackadder on A&E's Britwit. Rowan Atkinson is a household name in England, a celebrated star of television and the theater. The New York Times has called him a gifted mime and an expert in debunking pretension. Rowan received an International Emmy for his role in The Blackadder, and the series has twice swept the ACE Awards as Best Comedy Series on cable television. One element that has earned the series its distinction is that it changes with each season. The first series is set in the Middle Ages. Atkinson plays Edmund, Duke of Edinburgh, the bungling nephew of the fictitious King Richard III. Blackadder 2 jumps ahead to Elizabethan times, to the comic misadventures of Blackadder's great-great-grandson, Lord Edmund Blackadder. Blackadder III features E. Blackadder Esquire, descendant of both Blackadders, who suffered the loss of his family's fortune and now serves as the acerbic butler to the idiotic Prince Regent. When A&E met up with Rowan, he explained the premise behind basing the series in medieval times and the motivation for changing the series with each season. Also, Rowan reflected on the success of his brand of British humor with American audiences.
Well, there is said to be a great gulf between American and British comedy, which I suppose there is, but there is one level certainly on which American and British comedy seem to meet rather well, and that is basically in the kind of youthful market, you know, college level of humour, which tends to be kind of youngish sort of humour and rudish sort of humour. And of course the Blackadder is kind of young orientated and occasionally quite rude. And I think that is a level on which Americans can accept comedy very easily.
They do say, Mrs. M.
At the same time, there is something about the Blackadder, certainly from series 2 onwards, whereby the hero is quite a cool character. And most English comics or comic heroes are not cool at all. They're kind of, you know, gimpy, middle-class, suburban, put-upon husbands and putting upon wives. Tend to be fairly middle-aged, fairly uncool characters. Whereas Americans, I think, like their comedians to be quite cool. I mean, the ilk of, you know, Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd and Steve Martin and all these kind of guys, they're cool. You know, they're in charge. And, I mean, they get in sticky situations, but they get out of them in a fairly cool way. And the Blackadder, of course, is a pretty cool, hard and cynical character. And I think maybe that is another level on which it operates successfully for an American audience.
You look smart, Mr. Blackadder.
Stick the kettle on, Baldrick. It was risky, I suppose, trying to base a comedy series in medieval times, in any kind of period setting, because most sitcoms are set in, you know, modern-day households. But the inspiration for doing it was just that, was that we felt as though, you know, when we started to think about doing a sitcom of our own after doing sketch shows on TV for years, that we felt as though we didn't want to be compared to any contemporary or current situation comedy. And one surefire way of not being compared to John Cleese or Fawlty Towers was to go back 400 years and set it then. Of course, actually, all your characters and your situations and your jokes are very identifiable to a modern-day audience, otherwise they wouldn't be funny. So to a certain extent, you know, it's a cheat, really. It's the same jokes in different clothes. Occasionally you can make jokes about cutting people's heads off, which you generally can't in this day and age. I didn't think the character in the first series was very well-rounded. He was a bit of a mess. I mean, he looked quite funny, you know, he had a strange kind of aspect to him, which was vaguely amusing, and he spoke in quite a funny way, but he wasn't what I would call a particularly well-written for, a particularly well-rounded character. And when Richard Curtis and Ben Elton started to think about the second series, that they thought that a major change of gear would probably be a good idea. And they just came up with this guy who was, you know, who was really rather cool and competent. And it is quite rare, really, to home in, as I say, in British terms, on a comic character who has a kind of a certain panache to his life. And that seemed to work quite well. Of course, having set the precedent for changing the character every series, we're kind of stuck with it now, and it would seem extremely dull if we made 2 series on the trot in the same period or with the same character. Of course, increasingly, the character is staying actually very similar. His clothes change and he has a beard or he doesn't have a beard. But generally, he's staying pretty cool and calm and cynical, and it's the Baldrick character, his sidekick, who gets put upon, and he's the silly gimp.
Listen, now get out.
A present-day Blackadder is probably what our producer John Lloyd is most keen to exploit, which is some kind of, media hack who drives around in an Aston Martin and has his mechanic, who would probably be, Mr. Baldrick, in the greasy overalls, who would service his motor cars. And he would undoubtedly be something and somewhere around the royal family, probably some minor aristocrat. And then you can get all the contemporary problems of being a member of the royal family in the present day and age, and what an anachronism it is, and the press and television and the Archbishop of Canterbury and all the characters that you can have from the present day. And I think it would be an interesting series to do, but I think it would be quite different from virtually anything else that we've done in the Blackadder. So we'd have to change gear. We'd not only have to change our clothing gear, but I think that we'd have to change a lot of the basic jokes that are inherent in the series.
Sir, I fear you have been too long at soap. Whereas you hit him like this.
The future of the Blackadder is unclear because it's extremely difficult to get our writers to actually sit down and actually do anything, and they only make a series about every 2 years, so in between times I have to go off and do other things. But we are hoping to do this Dickensian series of the Blackadder, which will be Blackadder 4. Blackadder 5, I suppose, will logically be in the 20th century, and we are already projecting, actually, we're doing a Christmas special soon of the Blackadder, in which we do momentarily look into the future of the Blackadder, and we see Frondo Blackadder, who's dressed like some kind of ice warrior with lots of kind of muscles and long glowing black singlets of hair, who has basically killed everyone else off in the universe and is having a very good time in 3000 AD. I think there is a major future for the Blackadder. The only question is, getting the writers to write things, but at least changing the character and changing the situation and the period every series. It does inspire us. It does inspire the writers and inspire myself to carry on.
Rowan Atkinson can be seen in The Blackadder on A&E's Britwit. Britwit is a collection of the best of British comedy, featuring the outrageous Rising Damp, the truly tasteless French and Saunders, and the award-winning Yes, Prime Minister. A&E's Britwit, Tuesday and Thursday nights at 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific.